Hey guys, I had this idea for a video where I talk about all my different little characters I've been working on for apparently a year, or a year and a half specifically. I hadn't realized it's been that long since I started making these characters, so it really is about time where I actually talked about them or I put more about them out there. So first of all, I want to apologize if anything seems kind of off in the recording, like me talking and all that. If you can hear weird stuff in the background, like cars or even people, maybe something in my room, like, if there's any noises that aren't me talking, it's probably just my microphone being a little bit too good. I do have to look into that and figure out how to stop it from picking up other sounds. I also want to apologize for the speed paint video because my iPad was really struggling to screen record. When I first started, I was recording up until I think coloring. I finished coloring and then my iPad just kind of stopped recording and I lost all of that footage. So I had to redo all of it except for I didn't redo the sketch. So that's why the sketch is already there. I did originally have myself recorded sketching out the character, but you missed that. Unfortunately, I'm sorry. It also acted up when I got to the background. So at the end, as you'll see, the background is just suddenly drawn. That's because my iPad was being weird. I had technical issues and all that. So apologies for that ahead of time. And I would like to, before I get into the meat of the character, because so this character I'm about to talk about is Aylmer. He's the main character. He's the one that you follow in the story. He's the one that you see the thoughts of and all that. But he, I will admit, is a little bit boring for a main character. He's like the guy who doesn't have a lot of backstory. He doesn't have a lot of, he has a lot of personality, but he doesn't have a lot going for him. Like on his own, he's his friends around him, and that's what kind of gives him his story and personality. So I feel like this is a good video on top of being the first one to sort of talk about the world ahead of time so you understand kind of what I'm talking about. So this world is a fictional universe I made called Gishtou, and it's sort of where cats are just, it was very obvious when you're kind of looking into it. It's where cats are more intelligent. They're the only creatures there other than like prey animals. Like they can hunt rabbits, they can hunt like birds and fish and all that. Other than that, there's like no humans. They are the most intelligent animals in that universe. And on top of it, they have powers, which you'll see actually kind of make the world go round. They can be status symbols, they can be very important to these cats. So when I'm talking about powers or power marks, so for the cats, depending on the power that they have, they can have a certain kind of mark on their fur, like a pattern. Like for example, the shadow manipulation power gives cats this sort of specific kind of mask pattern, where it's a mask. You'll see it on some of the characters that have shadow manipulation, such as Namro. He has that, and so he has like the mask, and that goes all the way up to their ears, right? Or like the water cats have stripes on their bottom that kind of look like waves. It's a little more obvious when you're looking into it, and I will link the Toy House link to the world so you can look more into that, and then also the character I'm talking about today. I also have to point out the whole villainy thing and why that's like a big deal, other than the obvious that they're, villains, right? Always a big deal. You don't want them messing your stuff up. So in this world, the villains have been gone for like hundreds of years. So like just for anybody's lifetime, they haven't had to have dealt with villains, right? They haven't had to have hero cats and all that like they did hundreds of years ago. And so the start of the story of this webcomic I'm going to be trying to make is that they kind of find out that villains are back. So this dude who was thought to have been dead by now, he's forming villains and all that. So it's kind of like a big shocker. This was sort of snowballs the story as the cat's going to this adventure to stop the villains, right? Cliche story, whatever. I feel like the characters I made are very fun and I really want to talk. I'm obsessed with them. I love them. So with that all out of the way, with that talked about the world and all that, with that officially out of the way, I will actually get onto the topic of Aylmer. He's the main character. I can get into why he is in a moment, but First of all, I want to talk about his kind of personality. So he's sort of a very anxious cat. He's the kind of guy who doesn't want to go somewhere just because he doesn't know anybody or like the place is new, right? He's uncomfortable. Like if there's like a new store in town, he won't want to go alone. He'll want a friend because like he doesn't know where anything is and he's uncomfortable just wandering, right? Aimlessly wandering. So he does have that whole anxious kind of trope about him. But he is very loyal. He's very sweet. You know, he's the kind of guy that like when his friends need his help, like adrenaline kicks him and sort of makes him act before he can like overthink it, because that's his issue, is he overthinks things all the time. That's sort of his overall personality, especially in the beginning. And because he's the main character, I can't really talk a lot about how his personality changes over time because that would end up being kind of spoilers almost. But I mean, predictably, anybody can guess this really, but he does become more confident as the story progresses. That's kind of what happens when, I mean, you go on a whole adventure to stop villainy, right? Who could have guessed? From my kind of bullet points of what I want is that over time you can kind of see the progression of him being more daring and more willing to kind of jump into things, right? He's less afraid of stuff now because he can't be. You know, when you're afraid and you're trying to fight people, you know, it's kind of all an issue. But, you know, with his personality out of the way, I can start talking about his relationships with other characters. Because he doesn't exactly stand out, but that's kind of what I like about him, is that he doesn't stand out. So he kind of blends in with his friend group. You know, you see him with a group of cats, you don't really pick him out. So his best friend, his childhood best friend, is Lino. He is this very confident, it's very much like the kind of trope of the extrovert adopting the introvert, you know? He's very out there, he's very outgoing, he, you know, is the exact opposite almost, where he jumps into things without thinking ahead of time. He's not really afraid of many things. He has the electricity power, so he has a very common power, but he's very good with it. He loves having that main character energy about him. And similar to Lino is Namro, who is very similar in personality. They're both kind of like this duo who's just chaotic, right? Because like they both are overconfident. They both will just jump into things. They encourage each other to do it too. Like none of them stops to say, hey, you know, maybe we should think about this first. They both are like, you want to go jump off that cliff? And the other one's like, yeah, I want to jump off that cliff. And meanwhile, Aylmer has to be that kind of voice of reason of like, hey, jumping off cliffs can hurt you. That's actually bad. Don't do that. But that's like the main dynamic that I had come up with, was him and Lino being best friends, and then of course Namro being there and kind of like this chaotic double. The other cats that I still need to flesh him out with would be Ilana, who is this very grumpy, kind of fiery she-cat. She intimidates Aylmer, I would say. She's just overall like very kind of hard-headed. She also, the thing that they have in similar is that she also thinks before she does things, but not because she has anxiety, but more because she's just smarter about it. Like, she's more like, duh, you don't jump off cliffs. Like, who in their right mind would do that, right? So that doesn't even come across to her. The times that she does jump into things when she probably should think about it first is if, like, for example, if she's, like, mad, I guess. Kind of like that rage or, like, adrenaline. Kind of like Aylmer, where he has adrenaline. That's why he runs into things. And then there's L.A., who is also kind of chaotic. But she is also very sweet. I would say that she's very like understanding of anxiety. She doesn't really look like it. She kind of doesn't really act like it sometimes. But she does get it at the end of the day. And she does care about her friends a lot. And, you know, if Aylmer's worried about something, she's not going to kind of just encourage him in the sense of like, well, just go do it. She'll talk it out with him, even though she is also chaotic. And then last, and probably one of my favorite dynamics, is Hazel, who is a little kitten. She has a prophecy power. She kind of never really fit in, you know, it's a whole thing. But because, you know, she's a little bit awkward, she doesn't very fully understand social cues and all that. She's kind of like in her own mind all the time. Her head's in the clouds. she and Aylmer get along very well, kind of like a little baby sister to him. I mean, she is the baby of the group, so she is kind of just the little sister to everybody, really. But these two, I can imagine, like, just laying down and, like, stargazing, you know? But he would be the kind of guy who knows a lot about constellations and would be very happy to just sit there and, like, talk about them, you know, have a very nice, soothing, quiet night. And that's very much the kind of energy that she would bring to, like, their friendship. So those are all his current friends. The villains, it's kind of a no-brainer. He hates all the villains. They're all evil. They're all bad. You know, blah, blah, blah. But that's sort of like his main relationships, other than he has 2 siblings. He has an older brother and an older sister, and he has 2 parents. His parents are happily married still. This is sort of where his backstory gets very bland, I would say, is that he just lives a normal life. You know, his dad was actually a stay-at-home dad while the mother worked. He was a very good dad in the sense that he tried to teach them morals. You know, he was home with them, so he tried to do his best to kind of raise them to be good cats, and they did grow up to be very good cats. I mean, Aylmer's about to, like, save the world, you know. His older brother Elam was very much not an instigator. So like when they were all kittens, Elam and Rorua would very often bully Aylmer. I mean, that's the best, most plain way to say it, because of his power of mimicry. They were just kittens being kittens. There wasn't really a good reason to make fun of and bully him for it, other than he was different and he was, like, younger than them, right? Easy target. But Elam very much wasn't really the one to start it. He was a rowdy kitten. I would say that their sister was much more so. Elam is actually on his way to becoming a lawyer. He's going to school for it. So, you know, you can say that he did become a very kind of put together cat. Rorua, meanwhile, is a gardener for a more rich family, so she makes, like, really good money. She does, like their brother, Elam, she does feel bad for teasing Aylmer so much as kittens, but, I mean, you grow, right? You live and you grow and you whatever, right? So, I mean, there's not much you can really say about it. They were just kids. But they all get along. They're all very close. You know, they're a sweet little family. And that's sort of most of his backstory. I told you that he was a little bit of a boring character. So other than him being best friends with Lino, there was not really much else, you know? He grew up normally. He grew up in a nice home. He's still in a nice home, sort of. I mean, right now, currently, before the series ends, he's kind of, like, wandering with his friends trying to stop villains, but you get the gist. Before that, he was in a nice home. The most interesting thing about him, I guess, would be his power, which is mimicry. Like I think I've said already. It's an uncommon power that, like, allows him to mimic. You know, my power names are very on the nose. So mimicry is to mimic other powers. And a little bit of the development of it, actually, was that as I was kind of developing him and, you know, creating more of a character and more of a story, I was realizing, well, mimicry is, like, super overpowered. It's so OP. I mean, like, you could just copy any power, right? Like, what's to stop him from copying literally, like, because the main villain is the only cat with time control, right? So what's just stopping him from kind of, like, bam, time control, right? Like, that's way too overpowered. I can't have that, right? If you want a story, you can't do that. So I ended up kind of nerfing him, nerfing the power, and it's a lot more harder to get to that point, depending on the power. So the way it works is that they kind of have to see it first in action. They can't just have it described. They can't just imagine it. It has to be seen physically, in person, or in cat, whatever it would be called. In person, he has to see it. So, for example, he would be very good at, with the electricity power, because his best friend, you know, he grew up with, Lino, has electricity, and he would have seen his friend do that many times over, and at this point, you know, he's studied it, he's probably practiced it, he could do it. Waiting for that bus, or whatever that is. Meanwhile, you know, something like a more rare power, like, actually a good example would be that, a good example would be the charm power, because that is quite literally illegal. And so he would have never seen, even though his own mother has that power, he would have never seen that power in action. He would never know how to use it because he's never seen it. It's illegal. Cats are not allowed to use that power. So that's a very good example to kind of show the two differences of he's seen this one so many times he can redo it. He's never seen this, so he can't. So I'm sure you can kind of tell from the explanation that in order to do it well, it would be, okay, doing this a third time. And I'm sure you can kind of get from that explanation that in order to do a power well, he has to see the power. And then not just that, but it depends on the amount of times he's seen it and how long he's seen it. So like with the electricity, you know, he's seen it done many, many times, probably for many hours, you know, like that accumulates, right? It's just kind of like learning in school, it's studying. So that's how his power works. It's very uncommon. I actually don't think I have another character with his power, so he's kind of currently the only one. But in canon, he wouldn't be. There are other cats with it. It's just I don't have any characters with it right now. So with all that out of the way, I can talk a little bit about his development, actually. So I will say, first things first, that the way I make characters or their designs is less of a, I thought about it, you know, I thought about it's less like I thought about it and like I planned it. I hate these buses. And it's more like I just sat down, I just kind of had an idea. Sometimes I don't even have an idea, but I just sketched and I just drew and then I just colored. And that is how I come up with character designs. If it doesn't come to me, it's not going to happen. That's sort of the deal with it. So that's kind of, and I think I've said this already, but it has been a year and a half since I started coming up with the series, and Aylmer would have been one of my first few characters created. So I can't exactly remember my thought process at the time, but I think that's essentially what it would have been, because that's how I make every other character, is I just kind of draw them, right? And if I like them, I like them. So his design actually hasn't changed very much because I am super in love with it. I think he's adorable. The biggest change that I have seen, and the biggest change that I have sort of seen was that originally he had a brown spot on his left paw that I don't have anymore, and he also had little brown spots above his nose on his muzzle. And I think the reason why I don't have those anymore is I straight up forgot he had them. But I do think that he looks almost cleaner now. I kind of do like his new design still. I like his new design better than the old one, actually. I feel like the random spots added just kind of could have been a little bit too much, especially for a character I have to draw often. That's another thing, is that I think naturally I make kind of animation-friendly characters. Or like if they're main characters, animation-friendly. They're very friendly for drawing them over and over and over, which, because this is going to be a webcomic and because he's the main character, I would be. So I think if you think about it in that term, then he is actually a very well designed and balanced character. I like him. I think he's very cute, like I said. So in development for the story wise, Aylmer was actually about to be not exactly a side character, but kind of like one of his friends, where he's a main character, but not the very main character, not the main character. The main character was actually going to be Lino. And when I get to talk about him and his backstory, it'll probably make more sense, because he does have very much more of a main character backstory, much more of a main character personality even. But And I remember this thought process because it was such like a big moment of, oh wait, I need to change this story around. Is as I created Lino first, and then I was creating Aylmer, and then I was kind of thinking about it as I was creating him, and it kind of hit me. His power is much more interesting. Girl, I just realized I fucked up his muzzle. Okay, whatever. Don't focus on that. His power is much more interesting than just like electricity, right? He has mimicry, right? Like that's a main character power. And then I was thinking about it more, and I was kind of deciding that because Aylmer would have been one of the characters that went through a lot more development over time, like canonically in the story wise, like personality wise. Because he goes through so much development, it would be a waste to make him a side character because, or not the very main character, because you wouldn't be able to see in his head. His change wouldn't just be subtle, it'd be so subtle that you probably would get to the end of the story and then go, wait a minute, this character's different. Like, wait, this isn't the Aylmer I knew at the beginning, right? And the thing is that I feel like his anxiety also kind of makes him more interesting because he's going to have a lot more conflict going on in his head. And then because he's the main character, now you can see like in his thoughts and all that. Meanwhile, Lino would have basically the whole time have been like, yeah, I'll do that, and I'll do that. That's fine, I'll do that. And it's just like, that's boring to read over and over, right? It's more fun, I think, to kind of have this character be very hesitant and have to be kind of convinced, right? Or thinking more thoroughly about things and like kind of considering it more than what Lino would. So I think overall it was a very good change that Aylmer ended up being the main character. And I think as I actually kind of develop the story better and as I start actually drawing it out, that it'll come to life better than how I'm describing it. But overall, that's sort of it for Aylmer. I mean, I don't really have much else for him. Like I said, he's a little bit of a boring character, but he's my baby. I love him. That'll be about it for this video. If you would like to see more, feel free to request more. Feel free to kind of comment, do all the YouTube stuff, like, subscribe, notification bell, all that. But what I'm mostly kind of wanting is for people to like comment whether they kind of like this idea, whether they want more. It'll actually be very easy. You can go, because I'll link my Toy House stuff, so you can kind of go onto my profile there, and it's actually very easy. It's very straightforward. Just go to profile, just go to characters, and then from there just click Power Cats, right? Easy peasy lemon squeezy. The blue profiles, which you'll understand what I mean when you see it. The blue profiles are the hero main characters, the red profiles are the villain main characters, and then the gray profiles are background characters who actually don't have much of a profile going on. It's just kind of like their picture and a little description. And I will also mention that as of currently, and this can change later, but right now some of the heroes actually aren't fully done yet, so their profiles will look a little bit different, a little bit old and bad. They actually have broken images on there too, so I would recommend, if you want to see what they're supposed to look like first, I would recommend clicking on one of the villains first because they're all done. But yeah, that'll be about it. I hope you guys liked this. I hope this was like a fun little thing. I hope that if I do this again, my iPad doesn't screw up all over again. That was annoying. But yeah, I hope that you all enjoyed this. Have a good day, evening, night, morning, whatever time it is for you. Just have a good time, I guess. And I'll see you next time. Bye!